There are nights when the Gulf breeze carries more than just salt and seaweed. That August evening in Galveston, when I locked the heavy oak door of the Barnacle's Rest, the air tasted different, metallic, ancient, like pennies left in seawater for a century. The wooden wind chimes above the deck refused to make a sound, hanging perfectly still despite the coastal gusts that should have sent them clattering. Inside, in the bar I just emptied of customers and cleaned until the copper fixtures gleamed, something was moving bottles on the top shelf. One by one, methodically, the way a man searches for something he needs to find. My name is Jason Fox, and I have been pouring drinks in bars across America for over 2 decades. I have heard thousands of stories, but there are some that you just cannot forget. This is one of those. Before we continue, I would like to know, what state are you listening from tonight? Drop your city or state in the comments below. I love knowing these stories reach people all across the country. All right, back to that night. The Barnacle's Rest sits on a weathered pier that juts into the Gulf like an accusing finger. Galveston has always had that quality, that sense of history pressing against the present. The building itself dates back to the 1870s, survived the Great Storm of 1900 by some miracle nobody could quite explain. The owner, a guy named Curtis Barlow, hired me in June to manage the evening shift. Curtis kept his silver hair pulled back in a ponytail and wore reading glasses on a chain around his neck. He collected nautical antiques the way some people collect stamps, filling every corner of the bar with ship wheels, brass compasses, and faded maritime maps sealed behind glass. What made Curtis unusual was not what he displayed, but what he hid. In the storage room downstairs, behind cases of imported rum and boxes of cocktail napkins, sat a sea chest. Iron-banded oak, maybe 4 feet long, with a lock that looked like it could stop a hurricane. Curtis never mentioned it, never went near it, but his eyes would drift toward that storage room door whenever the conversation turned to local history. The first strange thing happened 3 weeks into my employment, a Tuesday night, slow enough that I was restocking olives and checking inventory. Around 10:30, the only customer left was a woman in her 50s who nursed a gin and tonic while reading a paperback thriller. The kind of regular who comes in not for company but for somewhere to exist without being alone in their house. The temperature dropped, not gradually, the way it does when a weather front moves through, but instantly. One moment I was comfortable in my t-shirt, the next I could see my breath fogging in the air between us. The woman looked up from her book, her eyes questioning. Air conditioning acting up, I told her, though we both knew the ancient wall unit couldn't produce cold like that even if it wanted to. She left 20 minutes later, hurrying her goodbye in a way that suggested she felt it too. That sense of wrongness that settles in your chest when your instincts scream danger but your eyes see nothing to justify it. I started locking up. The routine was simple. Wipe down the bar, stack the stools, count the register, lock the liquor cabinet, set the alarm. But that night, as I reached for the liquor cabinet key, every bottle on the top shelf shifted 3 inches to the left, in unison, the way soldiers march in formation. My hand froze halfway to the cabinet. The bottles sat there, innocent now, labels facing forward like they always did. Like they had always been exactly where they were, but the dust patterns on the shelf told a different story. Clean wood where the bottles now stood. Dust outlines where they used to be. I finished locking up in record time. When I mentioned it to Curtis the next morning, his reaction stuck with me. He did not laugh it off or make excuses. Instead, he stopped wiping down the espresso machine, set down his rag with careful precision, and asked me a single question. Did you hear anything? Hear what? Singing. Voices. Footsteps. His eyes held mine. Water dripping where there's no water to drip. No, just the bottles moving. Something in his shoulders relaxed. Good. That's good. He walked away before I could ask what would happen if I had heard those things. The second incident came on a Friday night, 3 days later. We were packed, every table full, the noise level somewhere between lively and deafening. I was making mojitos for a bachelorette party when I felt someone watching me. Not the casual observation of customers waiting for drinks, but that focused attention that makes the back of your neck prickle. I turned around. Nobody was looking at me, but on the mirror behind the bar, in the space between my reflection and the bottles, stood a figure, tall, wearing what looked like a long coat that reached the knees. A tricorn hat shadowed his face. I spun around. Nothing there. just the Friday night crowd, laughing and drinking and paying absolutely no attention to the space directly behind me. When I looked back at the mirror, the reflection showed exactly what should have been there. Empty space and bottles and the ordinary chaos of a busy bar. My hands shook enough that I had to remake the mojitos. The bachelorette party did not notice, but an older man sitting at the bar's corner nursing a whiskey neat caught my eye. He had the weathered look of someone who spent their life on the water, skin tanned to leather, eyes pale blue like sun-bleached denim. "You saw something," he said. Not a question. "Just tired. Long week." He nodded slowly. "This bar has a history." "Curtis never told you." "Told me what?" The man took a careful sip of his whiskey. "The Barnacle's Rest used to be called the Serpent's Promise. Back in the 1840s, it was where Jean Lafitte's crew would come ashore. Not Lafitte himself by then, he was long gone, but the men who sailed with him. The ones who never quite gave up the life. Pirates, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Privateers, they called themselves. Prettier word for the same work. He set down his glass. Story goes that one of Lafitte's lieutenants, a man named Ezekiel Thorne, hid something in this building. Something valuable enough that he killed 3 men to keep the location secret. Then he died in a storm before he could come back for it. Let me guess. Now his ghost haunts the place looking for his treasure. The old man's smile was thin. You do not have to believe me. But Curtis does. Why do you think he keeps that sea chest in the storage room locked up tight? Found it during renovations 5 years ago, sealed up behind a false wall in the basement. Whatever is inside makes sounds some nights. Scratching, like something trying to get out. He left a $20 bill on the bar and walked out before I could respond. I did not mention the conversation to Curtis, but I started paying attention to the building itself, to the way it seemed to settle and shift on its pilings like something breathing. Old buildings have rhythms, patterns of creaks and groans that you learn to read like a language. The Barnacle's Rest was starting to develop new vocabulary. 2 weeks passed, quiet ones, relatively speaking. The bottles stayed where I put them. The mirror showed only what it should, but the temperature drops continued, random and sudden, as if something was passing through the room pulling heat away in its wake. Then came the night of the storm. August in Galveston means hurricanes, and while this one was not expected to make landfall, the outer bands brought wind and rain that hammered the coast like artillery. Curtis called around 6 to say he was not coming in, that I should close early if business stayed slow. By 8 o'clock, I had exactly 4 customers, all locals who seemed more interested in watching the storm through the windows than in drinking. They left by 9. I decided to close up. That is when I heard it. Singing, faint like it was coming from very far away or from underwater. A sea shanty, the kind sailors used to keep rhythm while working the ropes. The melody wound through the storm noise, distinct and impossible. It was coming from the storage room. Every instinct I had screamed at me to leave. Lock the door, set the alarm, get in my car and drive away. But I have been in the service industry long enough to know that curiosity and stupidity often look exactly the same, and I have never been great at distinguishing between them. I opened the storage room door. The light switch did nothing. The bulb should have worked. I had replaced it myself just last week, but now the room sat in darkness, broken only by what filtered in from the bar. The singing was louder now, definitely coming from the direction of that sea chest. The lock rattled against the iron bands like something inside was testing it. I turned on my phone flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, catching dust motes that swirled in patterns that made no sense, moving against the air currents instead of with them. The sea chest sat exactly where it always did, but now it vibrated. Not much, just enough to make the lock dance against the metal. The singing stopped. In the silence that followed, I could hear water dripping, a slow, steady rhythm, drip, drip, drip. But the storage room had no pipes, no source of water except the cases of bottles stacked against the walls. Looking for something? The voice came from behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly dropped my phone. The man from the mirror stood in the doorway. Tall, just like I remembered, the long coat hanging off his frame like it was made for someone with more flesh on their bones. But I could see his face now, hollow cheeks, eyes that caught the light wrong, reflecting it back like an animal's. The tricorn hat cast shadows that moved independent of the light source. Who are you? My voice came out steadier than I expected. Ezekiel Thorne. though I suspect you already knew that. He tilted his head, studying me. You can see me clearly. Interesting. Most just catch glimpses. What do you want? What I have always wanted. What is mine? He gestured at the sea chest. That lock is new. Curtis added it. Thought it would keep me contained. You are inside the chest? His laugh was dry as old rope. Not inside. Bound to it. There's a difference. What Curtis found, what he locked away in his fear, is the key to my release. And you are going to help me. I should have run. Should have turned and sprinted through the bar and into the storm outside. But his eyes held mine, and I found my feet would not move. Not because of any supernatural force, but because some part of me needed to understand. Why me? Because you are here. Because you can see me. Because tonight, with the storm and the thin places between worlds, I have enough strength to ask. He moved closer, and the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Inside that chest is a map, hidden by my own hand before fever and storm took me. It leads to something I buried on the shore before the great storm changed these beaches forever. Help me find it, and I will leave this place. Continue to refuse, and things will get worse. Worse how? Your customers will start seeing me. At first just reflections, then shadows. Then I will appear to them as I appear to you. They will leave. The bar will die. Curtis will lose everything he has built. Thorne's voice dropped lower. And you will see me every time you close your eyes, standing at the foot of your bed, waiting. The threat was clear, but something about his desperation made me ask the question I had been avoiding. What did you bury? Does it matter? It does to me. He was silent for a long moment. Then, a share of Lafitte's final take. Gold coin, jewelry, items of value from a Portuguese merchant ship we took in 1824. I was supposed to split it with my crew, but greed is a powerful thing. I killed them instead, hid the treasure, planned to retrieve it once the heat died down, but the fever caught me first, and I died raving in a rented room with the location locked in my head and the map locked in this chest. So you are asking me to help you profit from murder and theft? His smile was cold. I am asking you to help me finish what I started so I can finally rest. What you do with the treasure after is your concern. Keep it, turn it over to authorities, throw it in the Gulf. I care only about completing the task. That is what binds me here. The unfinished work. I looked at the sea chest, at the lock that Curtis had added that Curtis had never explained, at the scratches on the wood that looked like fingernails had dragged across the surface from the inside. If I open this, I said slowly, how do I know you will not just kill me like you killed your crew? Because I am dead already. What use is violence to a ghost? He spread his hands. I can move small objects when the conditions are right. Create cold spots, appear in reflections. But I cannot touch the living, cannot harm them directly. All I can do is haunt. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows hard enough that I worried the glass might shatter. Rain hammered the roof like gravel thrown by giants. Inside the storage room, the water continued its steady drip. I made a decision I would spend months questioning. How do I open it? Thorne's face transformed. Not into happiness exactly, but into something like relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. The lock is new, but Curtis does not know about the secondary mechanism. Press the third iron band from the top, left side. There is a release. I knelt next to the chest. Found the band he described. Pressed. Something inside clicked. The lock popped open. I lifted the lid. The hinges screamed with rust and disuse, and the smell that emerged was pure ocean, salt and decay, and something else I could not name. Inside lay a leather oilskin, folded and sealed with wax that had somehow survived the centuries. Beneath it, taking up the rest of the chest's space, were bones. Human bones. 3 skulls grinned up at me from the darkness. My crew, Thorne said from behind me. I told you I killed them. Had to put them somewhere. My stomach turned, but I reached in and lifted out the oilskin. The leather was surprisingly flexible, like it had been preserved in the chest's sealed environment. I broke the wax seal and unfolded it. Inside was a map. Hand-drawn, the ink faded but legible, showing the Galveston coastline as it existed nearly 2 centuries ago. An X marked a spot on the beach, with detailed measurements from landmarks that probably no longer existed. But in the corner, written in tight script, was a note I could read clearly, 20 paces north of the twisted oak, 5 feet down. May God forgive me for what I did to get here. The twisted oak is gone, Thorne said. The great storm took it, but I remember exactly where it stood. I can show you. Now, in the middle of a hurricane. The storm is not at its peak yet, and this is the best time. The beach will be empty. Nobody to ask questions when you start digging. He paused. Assuming you want to dig. I looked at the map in my hands, at the bones in the chest, at the ghost of a murderer standing in the storage room doorway. Every rational thought in my head screamed that this was wrong, that I should put the map back, lock the chest, and call Curtis to deal with whatever supernatural problem his bar had acquired. But I had never been good at listening to rational thoughts. Show me, I said. We took my car. Thorne sat in the passenger seat, visible to me but presumably invisible to anyone else who might have looked in. He gave directions in that dry voice of his, guiding me down streets that wound through Galveston's eastern neighborhoods toward a stretch of beach that sat between developed areas. The storm made driving dangerous. Wind pushed the car sideways. Rain reduced visibility to almost nothing. But Thorne's directions were precise, and 20 minutes later I was parking in a deserted lot next to a beach access path. Here, Thorne said. Walk toward the water until you reach the high tide line, then north. Approximately 100 yards. You will know the place when you see it. How? Because I will be standing there. He vanished from the passenger seat. Just gone, like someone had flipped a switch. I grabbed the flashlight from my glove box, pulled my hood up against the rain, and stepped out into the storm. The beach was chaos. Waves crashed far up the sand. The tide pushed higher than normal by the storm surge. Wind tore at my clothes, making every step forward a fight. My flashlight beam barely penetrated the darkness and rain, but I pushed on, counting my steps, squinting against the wind. At what I guessed was roughly 100 yards, I saw him. Thorne stood above the high tide line, perfectly still despite the wind that should have torn through him. As I approached, he pointed at the ground. Here, he said. Dig here. I knelt in the wet sand. I had grabbed a tire iron from my trunk, the only tool I had that might serve as a makeshift shovel. The sand was heavy with water, but it moved. I dug. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became 20. My arms screamed. Water filled in the hole almost as fast as I could scoop it out. Then the tire iron hit something solid. I cleared away sand with my hands, feeling the shape emerge. Wood. Curved. A small chest, maybe 2 feet long, bound with metal bands like its larger cousin in the storage room. I worked it free and lifted it up onto the beach. It was heavier than it looked. Much heavier. Open it, Thorne said. He had moved closer, and in the storm's darkness, his form seemed more solid than before. More real. I broke the rusted lock with the tire iron, lifted the lid. Gold. The flashlight beam caught it and threw the reflection back like a small sun. Coins, dozens of them, stamped with Portuguese inscriptions and dates from the 1820s. Jewelry, too. Necklaces and rings that gleamed even under centuries of tarnish. And at the bottom, wrapped in oilskin like the map, a leather journal. My ledger, Thorne said softly. Every theft, every ship we took, every coin of our share. I kept meticulous records. Thought I was being smart. I opened the journal. The first page had a list of names, the crew he killed. Their shares, carefully calculated, now forfeit. Page after page of entries, describing raids and murders with the casual tone of someone documenting a business transaction. You kept evidence of everything you did, I said slowly. I was thorough. A fault, as it turned out. He looked at the journal, at the small chest of treasure. But it is finished now. The treasure is found. The task is complete. He turned to face me fully. Thank you. I can finally rest. But he did not fade, did not vanish into peace. Instead, his form solidified further, becoming more opaque, more present. Why are you still here? I asked. His expression changed. The desperation was gone. In its place was something colder, calculating. Because I lied, he said. The words hung in the storm wind. Lied about what? About what binds me here. About what I need. He moved closer, and now I could feel pressure from his presence, like the air itself was pushing against me. Unfinished business is not finding the treasure. The treasure was always going to be found eventually. Some storm would uncover it, or some developer would dig it up. No, what keeps me here is simpler. Tell me. Revenge. The word was flat. Final. I was betrayed. One of my crew survived that night. He was smarter than I gave him credit for, played dead while I killed the others. He took my map, the one I thought was hidden so cleverly, and he went to the authorities. Told them everything. About Lafitte's crew, about the raids, about me. He moved even closer. I tried to step back, but my feet would not respond. They hunted me down, caught me before I could retrieve the treasure. I died of fever, yes, but in a jail cell, shackled and helpless. And the man who betrayed me, he walked free, changed his name, started a new life here in Galveston, built a legitimate business, had children, grandchildren, a legacy. Horror was dawning. Curtis. His great-great-great-grandfather was William Barlow, my navigator, the one who survived. Thorne's smile was terrible. The Barlow family has owned this building in various forms for 5 generations. Always the same family, always profiting from the location that I helped establish. And I have been here, trapped, watching them prosper while I suffered. So what do you want? I want you to take that journal to Curtis. I want you to show him what his ancestor did. I want him to know that everything his family built is founded on betrayal and blood money. I want him to understand that his legacy is a lie. Thorne's voice dropped. And I want him to come here, to this beach, alone, to see where I buried what I killed for. Because when he stands on this spot, when he touches this chest, I will finally have enough connection to the physical world to do what I have wanted to do for 170 years. Touch him. Kill him. The storm seemed to pause. Even the wind died for a moment, leaving us in terrible silence. That is what breaks my curse, Thorne continued. Not finding the treasure, balancing the scales. His ancestor took my life. I take his descendant's life. Then I can rest. Then it is finished. I am not going to help you murder someone. You already have. He gestured at the chest. The treasure is uncovered. The journal is in your hands. You think Curtis will not want to see it? Will not come here to verify what his ancestor did? You have already set the pieces in motion. Now you just need to follow through. I looked at the journal, at the treasure, at the ghost of a man who had spent nearly 2 centuries plotting revenge. No, I said. His expression darkened. I told you what happens if you refuse. The hauntings will get worse. Your customers will flee. The bar will close. Curtis will be ruined financially instead of physically, but he will still suffer. Is that better? It is better than murder. Thorne studied me. You are more principled than I expected. Unfortunate. He glanced at the storm, at the waves crashing closer. But you misunderstand the situation. I do not need your permission. I just need you to bring the journal back to show Curtis. Nature will take care of the rest. What does that mean? It means Curtis knows this beach, knows its history. When he sees that journal, he will come here on his own. And when he does, I will be waiting. Thorne started to fade. You are free to warn him if you want. Tell him about me, about what I plan. But he already suspects. Why else would he lock that chest? Why else would he avoid the storage room? He does not believe in ghosts. Everyone believes when they need to. You did. Thorne was barely visible now, his form dissolving into the storm. Take the treasure. Take the journal. Go home. Think about your choices. We will speak again. Then he was gone. Just me and the storm, and a small chest full of blood money. I do not know how long I stood there. Long enough that the tide started reaching for the chest. Long enough that my hands went numb from cold and rain. But eventually I moved. I closed the chest, picked it up, carried it back to my car. The drive home was automatic. My mind was somewhere else entirely, racing through possibilities. I could throw the journal in the Gulf, could rebury the chest, could walk away from the bar and never tell Curtis anything. But Thorne was right about one thing. The pieces were in motion, and I had been the one to move them. I called Curtis from my apartment, told him we needed to talk, told him it was about the bar's history. His voice on the phone was carefully neutral, but I heard the tension underneath. He knew something was coming. We met the next morning at a coffee shop far from the Barnacle's rest. I brought the journal, Left the treasure locked in my car trunk, but brought the evidence of what his ancestor had done. Curtis read in silence. His face remained neutral, but his hands shook. Page after page of his great-great-great-grandfather's testimony against Thorne. The deal he cut with authorities. The new identity he assumed. The building he purchased with money that probably came from his own share of pirate treasure. Carefully hidden and legitimized. I knew there was something, Curtis said finally. My grandfather told me stories before he passed. About the building's history. About why we could never sell it. Why it had to stay in the family. He said we were keeping watch over something dangerous. The chest. He never said what was in it. Just that it had to stay locked. That opening it would be catastrophic. Curtis looked up at me. You opened it. I did. And now, I told him everything. About Thorne, about the map, about the treasure on the beach, about the revenge that a ghost had been planning for 17 decades. Curtis listened without interrupting, his coffee going cold in his hands. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said something I did not expect. I have to go there. To the beach. That is what he wants. He told me he would kill you if you touched the chest. That is how he breaks his curse. I know. Curtis folded his hands. But I also know that running from this would just delay the inevitable. He is bound to the building. To my family. If I do not end this, it will pass to my children. To their children. Generation after generation haunted by something my ancestors set in motion. There has to be another way. Is there? He looked at me steadily. You have been in the service industry long enough to know how these things go. Sometimes you can diffuse a situation, talk someone down, find a peaceful solution. But sometimes the drunk guy is going to swing, and all you can do is duck and call the police. This is the second kind. This is not a drunk guy. This is a ghost that wants you dead. Then we make sure he does not get what he wants. Curtis stood up. Come with me. Not to the beach, not yet. But there is someone I need you to meet. We drove to a small house near the seawall. An old woman answered Curtis's knock, her white hair pulled back in a bun, her eyes sharp despite her age. Curtis introduced her as Mama Celeste. He did not explain how he knew her, but the way she looked at him suggested they went way back. Show her the journal, Curtis said. I did. Mama Celeste read in silence, her weathered hands turning pages with care. Finally, she closed the journal and looked at both of us. This spirit is bound by rage, she said. Her accent was thick, Caribbean roots showing through. Revenge is what keeps him here, but revenge cannot be satisfied by violence. Violence just breeds more violence, more binding, more curse. How do we break it? I asked. You give him what he actually needs, not what he thinks he wants. She moved to a shelf and pulled down a worn leather bag. He needs acknowledgement, justice. His crimes recognized, his victims remembered. You do that. The rage loses its grip. She explained the ritual. Simple in concept, complicated in execution. We would need to go to the beach, to the spot where Thorne buried his treasure. But instead of letting Curtis touch the chest and trigger Thorne's revenge, we would acknowledge what happened. Read the victims' names from the journal. Pour an offering into the waves. Give Thorne's crimes and his victims the witness they never got. It might not work, Mama Celeste warned. Spirits this old, this angry. Sometimes they are too far gone, but it is better than letting him kill. And if it does not work, Curtis asked, then you run. Fast. And you never go back to that building. We went to the beach that afternoon. The storm had passed, leaving the sand smooth and clean. I found the spot easily, the disturbed ground still visible. The small chest was gone, pulled away by the tide or taken by someone who found it. But that did not matter. The place itself was what counted. Curtis and I stood there, the journal open between us. Mama Celeste had given us candles, but they would not stay lit in the wind, so we worked without them. I read the victims' names aloud. 3 men. James Killian, age 24. Robert Finch, age 31. Marcus Holloway, age 19. I read where they came from, how they joined Lafitte's crew, how they died. Then Curtis spoke. He acknowledged what his ancestor did. The betrayal, the testimony, the profiting from it all. He said the words Mama Celeste had taught him. asking for forgiveness on behalf of his family line, offering recognition to those whose stories had been buried with them. The air changed, the temperature dropped, but this time it felt different. Not threatening, more like attention, like something was listening. Thorn appeared, standing 10 feet away, his form more solid than I had ever seen it. But his face was different. The cold calculation was gone, replaced by something I could not quite read. "You think saying words fixes what was done?" His voice carried no echo. "No," Curtis said steadily. "Nothing fixes murder. Nothing erases betrayal. But silence makes it worse. Your victims deserve to be remembered. You deserve to be held accountable. My family should have done this a century ago. We did not. That is our failing." Pretty speech. But Thorn's voice had lost some of its edge. "It is true." Curtis looked directly at the ghost. "You want revenge. I understand that. But killing me does not bring your crew back. Does not give you back the life my ancestor took. It just adds more violence to violence, more death to death. When does it end? When I say it ends? No." Curtis's voice was firm. "It ends when you let it end. When you choose to stop." The silence stretched. Thorn looked at the place where the chest had been, at the journal in my hands, at Curtis standing there, offering acknowledgement instead of running away. "I spent 17 decades planning this," Thorn said softly. 17 decades building up rage. 17 decades waiting for the moment I could balance the scales. And you are telling me to just let it go? I am telling you that revenge will not give you peace. Only letting go can do that. You sound very certain for someone who never died with a knife in their back. "I am certain," Curtis said, "because I have spent my whole life watching people destroy themselves over grudges they would not release. I am a bartender, Ezekiel, same as you were before you turned pirate. We see how people hurt themselves. We see how poison tastes sweet until it kills." Thorn laughed. It was a bitter sound, but there was something else in it too. Something like recognition. A bartender. Is that what I was before all this? He looked at his hands. "I barely remember anymore." The rage burned away everything else. "Then let it go," I said. "Remember who you were before the rage, before the murder, before the betrayal. Remember the man who kept a journal not because he wanted to brag about his crimes, but because he could not quite let go of his need for order, for accountability, for things to make sense." His hands were shaking. Or maybe that was just the way his form was starting to dissolve, losing solidity, losing presence. "I do not know if I can," he whispered. "The rage is all that is left. Then die with more than that," Curtis said. "Die knowing someone witnessed what happened to you. Someone acknowledged it. Someone said your victims' names. That is more than most ghosts ever get." Thorn was fading, not vanishing the way he usually did, but slowly becoming transparent, like fog burning away in morning sun. His face cycled through emotions too fast to track. Rage, grief, exhaustion, relief. "Tell him I am sorry," he said, his voice distant now. "William, my navigator. Tell him I understand why he did what he did. I would have betrayed me too. He has been dead for 150 years, Curtis said gently. "Then tell his descendant. Tell yourself." Thorn was barely visible now. "Tell someone so the words exist somewhere other than my head." "I will," Curtis promised. And then Thorn was gone, not in a dramatic way. No flash of light, no sound. Just there one moment and gone the next, like a thought you meant to finish but lost track of midway through. We stood on the beach for a while longer. The waves continued their pattern. The wind pushed clouds across the sky. The world kept moving forward like nothing significant had happened. "Did it work?" I asked finally. "I think so." Curtis looked at the journal. "But we should still do something with this. Properly." We took it to the Galveston Historical Society. Curtis explained that it was a family document he thought might be of interest. The curator's eyes widened as she read through it, recognizing the historical value immediately. She promised to preserve it, to include it in their archives, to make sure Thorn's story and his victims' names would be part of the official record. It seemed like the right thing to do. The Barnacle's rest is quiet now. No cold spots. No bottles moving on their own. The mirror shows only what is actually there. Curtis left the sea chest in the storage room, but he removed the extra lock. Whatever was inside that needed to be contained is gone. Some nights, though, when I'm closing up and the bar is empty and still, I catch a scent in the air. Salt and old wood and something like rum. It is not threatening, more like a reminder. A presence that passes through and moves on, the way customers do at the end of the night. I never found out what happened to the treasure chest. The tide probably took it, scattered the coins along the Gulf floor where they will rest until someone stumbles across them in 100 years. Maybe that is fitting. Maybe some things are meant to stay buried until their time comes around again. Curtis and I do not talk about that night very often, but sometimes when the bar is slow and we are both tired, he will pour 2 whiskeys and raise his glass in a silent toast to nobody in particular. I understand what he means. You do not forget the ghosts you helped put to rest, even when they were never your ghosts to begin with. So that is the story. Make of it what you will, believe it or do not. I am past caring whether people think I am lying or crazy or making things up for effect. I know what happened on that beach. I know what I saw. And I know that sometimes the dead need more than prayers and peace. Sometimes they need someone to listen, someone to say their story out loud so it becomes part of the world instead of staying locked in silence. Have you ever felt an inexplicable presence? Experienced something that defies all logic? Share your story in the comments. I read everyone, and who knows, maybe your story will be the next one I share here. If you want to keep hearing stories like this, real stories that have been told to me over these 20 years behind the bar, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next story if you dare.